Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and thanks to the contributors so far. Anglesey and its representatives are unanimously against the National Grid's plan to put a line of pylons across the island. Myself, the County Council, the MP, community councils, thousands of residents have been consistent in our supports against the Grid's plans, and there's been hardly any positive responses from the Grid to that chorus of voices. Quite simply, they're going for the cheapest option. Yes, they've tried to give the impression that they've compromised a little by agreeing to put cables in a tunnel under the Menai, but the truth is that they never intended to seek consent for another line of cables across the Menai, which of course is an area of outstanding natural beauty. But they did have an option other than pylons across the Isle. The answer, quite simply, well, yes, of course there was another option. Undersea and underground links are quite common. I recall in my very first meeting with Grid officials back in 2013, those officials told me, well, of course, we can put cables under the sea. It would be a technical challenge, but of course it can be done. But since then, the idea hasn't really been considered in earnest as it should have been, with technical arguments put forward time and time again. And that is despite the undersea links that are developed in other parts of Britain, but it's very difficult for lay people such as myself to make a strong case against the Grid's technical arguments. But I am still convinced that this is an option that could work. But what if we accept that the technical challenge of linking the nuclear power station by underground cables is too great a challenge? Well, there's nothing new in undergrounding technology, and there is adequate evidence that it's more efficient technology in terms of energy loss from the Grid, the resilience in poor weather, as we've heard. Yes, it leaves a scarred landscape temporarily, and it is more expensive, and cost is at the heart of the Grid's proposals on Anglesey. Pylons are the cheapest option. The short-term cost for the Grid is lower than other options. Some £400 million is the additional cost, according to the Grid, of undergrounding. But what of the cost of pylons for the people of Anglesey and the value of their property, their businesses, to tourism? Never mind, of course, the impact on quality of life. Rather than putting the financial burden on the people of Anglesey, the cost should be borne across all energy users, and I've seen estimates that the cost of undergrounding would be less than a penny a week for every electricity user in Britain over the lifespan of that link.
As you know, we both attended a Nota Pylon meeting on Anglesey in December 2015, but do you share my concern that although the National Grid told me that they're paid whether they put pylons over or underground, but Ofgem require best value for the customer, the One Voice Wales Anglesey Pylon Committee was written to members on their response to the National Grid consultation, say the Grid has declared since 2012 that the pylon option has been chosen on the basis of costs alone, and that the pylon option brings only negative impacts to the sustainability of small and medium businesses in the tourism and agriculture on the island.
You're certainly right. I agree, and Ofgem is key. I'll come on to some of the deliberations that I have had with Ofgem in a minute. It's crucial that we move, as we're hopefully going to be doing in the Assembly today, to a situation where there is an assumption in favour, through Ofgem allowing that in favour of undergrounding. I'll go on.
The additional cost of undergrounding, of course, is something that the Grid itself know that they will have to pay with developments in certain areas. We've already heard about the developments taking place in national parks. Now, Anglesey is not a national park. We don't have the legislative safeguards that a national park has, but for an area where tourism is more important than it is in any other part of the UK as a percentage of GDP, then of course natural beauty is as important as in any national park. I discussed the issue with Ofgem before Christmas, and they agreed to insist that the Grid should set out far more clearly how they held their visual impact assessment, and NRW also in their response to the Grid consultation has noted strongly that they don't believe that sufficient visual impact assessments have been carried out on Anglesey, and the truth is, of course, that you can't get away from the conclusion that the visual impact of pylons is going to be greater than the impact of any other means of carrying electricity, and that's why Denmark and Germany have recently decided that undergrounding will be the norm there. And Denmark, I think, is spending an additional £2 billion on undergrounding cables already in existence. Ofgem has already agreed to an application for me to look at this issue, to start to consider whether this should be the norm across the whole of Britain too. Today, we are asking the National Assembly for Wales to state that we believe that this should be the new norm in Wales, and that the North Wales project across Anglesey and every other project. So support the motion.